Okay, councillors and staff and guests, welcome to this council meeting. I want to call on. Just missing one bit of paper. Hold on. I want to welcome everybody and thank you very much for your contribution in the earlier budget meeting. I'd ask the chamber to be upstanding as I call on Councillor Landsberg to provide an acknowledgement to the Traditional Custodians.
On behalf of Council, I would like to start by acknowledging the Traditional Custodians of the Sunshine Coast local government area, the Kabi Kabi peoples of the coastal plains and northern hinterland, and on whose traditional lands we gather today, and the Junibara peoples of the southern hinterland. We wish to pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the important role First Nations people continue to play within the Sunshine Coast community.
Thank you, Councillor Landsberg. Please remain upstanding as I invite the Regional Manager of Scripture Union Sunshine Coast and Wide Bay for School Chaplaincy, Kerry Evans, to read the prayer. Thank you, Kerry.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I invite you, according to your own traditions and conscience, to pray for God's blessing and guidance, or simply use this moment for personal reflection as I pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this fabulous region in which we live. Thank you for all the natural beauty that not only we enjoy and appreciate, but also the thousands of visitors who visit our region for holidays and relaxation. Bless these men and women of council who have committed themselves to serve the people of the Sunshine Coast. Give them wisdom as they discuss and debate the balance of progress and environmental sustainability. Bless these men and women as they work together, though may not always see eye to eye on the matters at hand, but let them stand shoulder to shoulder as they provide leadership for the Sunshine Coast to continue to be a shining light of excellence, not only in Queensland but throughout this nation. Bless them with wise decisions that reflect their heart for the region and commitment to the people, and that the way forward achieves the best possible outcomes for all. We pray also a special blessing over their families, who also make a sacrifice of their time and personal privacy. May each councillor's family time be a priority and richly blessed. Thank you again, Lord, for this time, and continue to bring blessings and wisdom to these leaders. In your name, amen.
Thank you, Kerry, very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Please be seated. Councillors, there's just a couple of things I'd like to bring to your attention that have occurred over the last little while that I think is important. And the first of that is to recognise Queen Elizabeth on her Platinum Jubilee during 2022. This year, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II became the first Australian monarch to celebrate 70 years of service for her Jubilee, Platinum Jubilee. We proudly remember Her Majesty's visit to the Sunshine Coast in March 2002 when we played host to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. Her Majesty opened proceedings and later celebrated her Golden Jubilee with a banquet at the Hyatt Coolum amongst extraordinary security measures in the wake of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. The Sunshine Coast has honoured Her Majesty's service by lighting up a number of locations across the region in royal purple between 2nd and 4th of June, including Ocean Street Maroochydore, the Kings Beach Water Fountains, Buddina Village Amphitheatre and the Sunshine Coast Stadium. To further mark the occasion, Sunshine Coast Museums are sharing displays and stories at council locations across the region, and that will continue for the month of June. So on behalf of the people of the Sunshine Coast, I congratulate Her Majesty on achieving such a remarkable milestone and thank her for her unwavering public support. Thank you. And the second thing I'd like to raise with you is to reinforce the advice we received last week that the Sunshine Coast region gained international recognition and officially joined UNESCO's World Network of Biosphere Reserves. Our council now stands proudly as an international site of excellence and an area of natural beauty. a partnership between Sunshine Coast Council and our community, which has been 7 years in the making. It is another great example of the value of planning strategically, holistically and fulsomely to achieve a great community outcome. A biosphere credential recognises and celebrates the people and natural environment that make our region such a wonderful place to call home. It's a natural fit for the Sunshine Coast as its values reflect our aspirations of being Australia's most sustainable region, healthy, smart and creative. Sunshine Coast Council is committed to protecting and enhancing the region's livability, our strong economy, our sustainable built environment and beautiful natural assets for current and future generations. As Sunshine Coast Mayor, I'm extremely proud on your behalf to be able to say to our council and community how delighted we are to become a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. Well done. And finally, while I'm on my feet, I bring you greetings from our newly minted Prime Minister, with whom I met on a couple of days ago. Anthony Albanese met with myself and a half a dozen of my Queensland mayoral colleagues, along with some colleagues from New South Wales, to particularly talk about the impact of the floods of a couple of months ago. And you'll recall that that heavy rain, that system effectively started here and stayed for a long time, dropped a lot of rain, a lot of which found its way north to Gympie and south to Somerset, into the Ipswich Bremer system and into Brisbane. But it kept on going from there and wreaked havoc all the way down over the border in New South Wales. And in particular, I had spent quite some time with Mayor Steve Craig, who's the Mayor of Lismore, who many of you would know, but may not know his name, because of the coverage that the impact on Lismore received. Coincidentally, his son lives on the Sunshine Coast. Whilst there were certainly many councils worse off than the Sunshine Coast, for many of our community, particularly those people in and around Landsborough and Beerwah, Peachester, where those wild winds went through and wreaked havoc, they would be pleased to know that the new Prime Minister, in one of his earliest duties, recognised the impact there and made the point that he's a good, strong friend of local government. He's been in government a long time, been in the Parliament a long time, been in government on a couple of occasions, but repeated the fact that he was a good friend of local government. He believed in what local government did, and he recognised the value that local government added. And he and Senator Murray Watt, Queensland Senator, who's responsible for emergency services, made the point that they recognised and would encourage the continued leadership that councils provide in disaster management. And I think all too often at a federal and state level, it's forgotten where the real work occurs. And in our case, that's normally in the hub at Nambour, the emergency services hub there, where we work with, and indeed our officers provide guidance and direction to the police, to the fireys, to the AMBOs, to the SES, and to many other groups, including our own communities and individuals who utilise facilities like the disaster hub, which is vital. So it was a nice thought, I think, from the Prime Minister to acknowledge those communities that have been so severely hurt. And again, I make the point, communities like Lismore will be decades in recovery. We got off lightly to some extent. So anyway, best wishes from Anthony Albanese. Now, Councillor Prey, you want to raise an issue around attendance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I'd like to move a leave of absence request, if I may, please. The words are up on the screen. The Council approve a leave of absence for myself, Councillor Jason O'Prey, for the ordinary meetings of Thursday 28 July 22 and Thursday 25 August 22, should technology and or telecommunication failures prevent my online attendance. Mr Mayor, if I can get a seconder for that, I can speak to it if you like.
Okay, moved by Councillor O'Prey, seconded by, I think, Councillor Landsberg. No, that's fine. All those in favour? No, sorry, I'm doing a bit earlier.
I'm happy to go that way.
Right.
Mr Mayor, I
know
would
you
like
want
to
to
just
explain.
explain the reason for this. In fact, in 10 years, this is the first time I've ever seen an item 3.1 come to the council. Mr Mayor, this is really an insurance policy. I intend to go to Indonesia and Bali for 4 weeks, which bookends 2 ordinary meetings to see family and also to have a holiday and a vacation. Mr Mayor, I have every intention of attending our ordinary meetings of council on both dates. It's just that I don't actually have the confidence in some of Indonesia's telecommunications to warrant that I should not put this in today. So I hope that makes it very clear for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prey. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. The minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 26th of May have been received. Can someone confirm? Move. Councillor Cox, seconded Councillor Natali. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. There is no mayoral minute. Item 6, councillors, I'd like to draw to your attention that on 12 October 2020, amendments to the Local Government Act 2009 and Local Government Regulation 2012 came into force. The amendments include a new Chapter 5B, which sets out new legislative requirements for dealing with councils' conflicts of interest in local government matters. These arrangements will apply to how we manage such matters at today's meeting. So if anyone has a prescribed conflict of interest or a declarable conflict of interest, please raise that prior to the item being addressed. There are no procedural motions. Item 7 is presentations, and I'll pass over to Councillor Natali, who is going to talk about the 2021 Australian Institute of Horticultural Green Space Urban Award.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It was a great honour to receive the Australian Institute of Horticultural 2021 Green Space Urban Award for Mooloolaba Boardwalk and Northern Parkland project, recognising the project's excellence and environmental responsibility. And it was fantastic to see that both the President and a number of members of his council actually came to Mooloolaba, presented the award on the actual boardwalk itself, and it just turned out to be a great day. It was quite challenging for the President to get here. He was delayed by a couple of hours, but just made it right in time, so that was really lovely to see him there. This award highlights Council's commitment to preserving and enhancing our natural and urban environments, and the Mooloolaba Foreshore Revitalisation Project is a great example of how we are building for the future while sustaining the important natural assets we value most. The Northern Parklands is the first stage of the multiple-stage Mooloolaba Foreshore Revitalisation Project. When all stages of this project are complete, public beachfront parklands in Mooloolaba will be increased by 40%. Throughout the deliveries of these projects, the team include more than 10,000 plants, removed invasive and noxious weeds, and were able to manage and protect the existing iconic Norfolk pines and native vegetation within the parkland. I'd like to congratulate the project team for their efforts with the Northern Parklands and their continued efforts with the Mooloolaba Foreshore Revitalisation Project. That includes Jamie Franklin, Adam Stewart, Ben McGovern and Chris Sturgis. Well done, team, and it's just fantastic that tomorrow we will make it available for the public for the start of the school holidays, and the following Saturday we'll have a great time to be able to celebrate with the community with a big beach party. But I'd like to now present this award. It's a great achievement.
Well done. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Much appreciated. Well done. Thank you, Councillor Joe. We'll move on to the first item, which is item 8.1, the 22-23 Procurement Policy and Procurement and Disposal Framework. And I welcome Paul Skillen to give us a presentation. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. I'd like to take the opportunity to present to you the 22-23 Procurement Policy and Procurement Framework. The framework is set up through the Local Government Act and regulations, which places responsibility on us to comply with the sound contracting principles when entering into our procurement. It also requires us to produce and maintain and review annually a number of documents that form that framework. Primarily, they are the procurement policy And under the strategic contracting procedures, it's the contract manual, that's our how-to manual, and then a contracting plan, which looks at what we'll be procuring in the coming year. There's been a number of changes that we're proposing from the 21-22 model. The 6 of those that are there appear up there, and I will go into some detail of 3 of them in particular, namely the Environment, Sustainability and Procurement Guideline, the Social and Economic Factors Evaluation, and also the Asset Thresholds. But just quickly for the other 3, the categorised procurement is an internal process that we'll be undertaking to move to a more categorised model than we currently do. The general exception is an aggregation of all of the available exceptions into one approach to seeking approvals for them. It means we'll consider things more consistently than what we currently do, while still maintaining the ability to look at each exception as we approach it. That doesn't apply to the exception of land, by the way. They will still come to this forum. The removal of the high value request for quotes is just tendering more, so we're not going to use a 5 quote approach in the coming 12 months. Importantly, the most substantial change has been through the introduction of an Environment and Sustainability and Procurement Guideline. That guideline seeks to contribute to Council's commitment to our zero net emissions plan, and in particular to target the Scope 3 emissions that Council is responsible for. They include all other direct greenhouse gas emissions that occur in Council's value chain. For the 2021 financial year, we had indirect or Scope 3 emissions accounted for approximately 20% of the total of Council's emissions. We've laid out through the guideline the way that Council will approach the application of the guideline. It's a 5-step approach that in the planning stage, as number 1 there, has Council looking and considering what it wants to achieve from whatever the good or service is that we are seeking to get from the market, and in doing so to particularly look at the sustainability environmental opportunities that we have. That will be the biggest change internally for Council, will be to look at that early stage what we want from the other end when it's all completed. The remaining steps then are to approach the market and embed within the procurement documentation our specifics requirements for environment and sustainability, during evaluation to consider it also, then in particular to manage the contract in a way that ensures that contractors are providing the goods and services that they've been engaged to provide with the sustainability priorities that they have included in their submission. So there will be a refocus and an improvement, I believe, in the way we go about our contract management. And then, of course, we could never do any of this without having learning and review opportunities. The next more significant change is the social and economic factors. Currently, we have 20% apportioned to local preference, and then 5% of the evaluation weighting apportioned to either First Nation and or social benefit. We're proposing to aggregate that together into one 20% allocation that is considered across those 3 metrics. So, to be clear, local, First Nation and social benefit. We'll consider at the time of forming, much like step 1 before, at the time of putting together the procurement plan, what we want to get from the market, and in considering that, apportion the evaluation weighting criteria within that 20% range. So there will never be less than 20% apportioned to that combination, and if there is no opportunity that we can see to engage a First Nation business or to engage a social benefit provider because of the nature of the contract or the industry that we're engaging with, then the local will still be at 20%. I stress to you it's important that we're not reducing that 20% allocation. We're just trying to find a better way that doesn't have this 5% outlier that some businesses will turn their mind to when we might have an opportunity to drive a greater engagement with our First Nation businesses or with social benefit providers. The third one is the asset thresholds. Currently they are at $5,000 for plant and equipment and $10,000 for any other non-current asset other than land. We're proposing to align that with what is the one quote threshold for purchase of goods and services, and that's at that $25,000 mark. What that means presently, to dispose of assets worth more than $5,000 or $10,000, we would be doing a tender. We're lifting that amount to 25 and we'll do tenders for 25 and above. It gives us a little bit more latitude of how we dispose of some of the lower value items. We found that tendering and auctioning stuff of relatively low value actually costs more to do that, or costs a significant amount to do the tender and auction than disposing it in some other ways. Under the contracting plan, we have an obligation to produce to Council significant contracting plans which identify, in this case, contracts that we believe we will enter into in the course of the coming year that have a value of $5 million or more, or are a particularly high risk. The 9 that appear in front of you at the moment have certain degrees of risk, but primarily the 9 of them are there because they have a value of more than $5 million. 9 is the most we've ever entered into in the course of a year. We're generally around the 6 or 7 mark. So 9 gives us a fair bit of work to be doing during the course of the year for some higher value procurement activities. Now, beyond the changes that are proposed in the current version of the procurement policy and the associated plans, is some further work being done with our work health and safety. We're midway through a couple of reviews and reports into certain activities, but particularly in this case, how we are approaching work health and safety in our contracting. What we're seeking to do is take the results of those reviews and implement some changes that make it clearer on the obligations of both council and the contractors that we enter into contracts with on their work health and safety and on our work health and safety responsibilities during the course of any type of contract that we enter into. Then just quickly wrapping up, we're looking to, again, not a change documented in the policy, but looking to bring together our supplier briefings into being both an information session, a business development opportunity, and an explanation of how to do business with council. Previously, we've been having 2 formal get-togethers that we've called supply briefings twice a year to outline what it is that we're doing to anyone who's interested in coming. Due to COVID and a number of other reasons, that they've started to reduce significantly in attendance. We've tried putting it on, publishing it afterwards, but we believe that if we go online with them and bring that all together, we can offer something a little bit better than what's previously been offered. Just to wrap up for where we are at this year so far, to see what those our policy or guideline engagements achieving. To the 31st of May of this year, we've had procurement spend of $372 million. Of that, 265 or 71% has been with local suppliers. In terms of our social benefit, we have a number of fairly significant contracts in place with social benefit providers, but the 2 largest are evidence there. In terms of our First Nation engagement, we've currently spent $1.8 million for the year, which is the highest that we've achieved since been reporting on it, with First Nation businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Someone prepare to move? Councillor O'Prey moving. Seconder, Councillor Landsberg, thank you. Would you like to open, Councillor O'Prey?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. And firstly, congratulations, Paul. Your attention to detail is brilliant, mate. I thank you for our one-on-one meetings in regard to this. It's been a real journey, and rightly so, councillors. This is our policy into making sure that we're responsibly spending the ratepayer dollar. This is sound contracting principles, which I'm very encouraged by, and the tendering processes have been explained to me incredibly well. I'm very comfortable in that space. I welcome the amendments. The 3 main amendments that you've already mentioned was the environment and sustainability, the social and the economic benefit, and also the asset thresholds. Now, particularly one was the environment and sustainability amendments, and we've all been going on about how council wants to get down to zero net emissions, and we're all for that. But what we need to make sure and be the watchdog over is that our contractors are doing the same thing. It's no good having a contractor going out there and burning 1 million miles of carbon if we're going to be contracting them here and we don't claim it. We need to make sure that they're doing the right thing as well. The other thing what I want to talk about was the asset thresholds. Going to $25,000, oh my God, I can't believe we've been at $5,000 for so long. It makes sense, it's common sense. $25,000 is where we're at and it's really good. Quotes are difficult for councillors. We're having a lot of trouble getting quotes coming into council. It costs a lot of money. It costs the commercial operators money and time to make a quote to council. Albeit once they get in the door and they can do a really good job for us and they can make a few bucks, it's really difficult to get to that position. And we're finding that people are just saying, I'm that busy at the moment, bugger it, I'm not going to worry about it. And that's what we're finding in the current market, and it's not working for us. So we've got to go out of our way now and start to looking at reducing our number of quotes that are required and making it easier for the applicants. And I also agree with the 20% weighting, the change in the weighting, where we're going from combining the local, the First Nations and the social benefit weighting. So 20% is really good where it's at. If you're a local operator, a local provider, a mum and dad business, which I talked about in the budget earlier this morning, this is a great opportunity to give yourself a little bit of a head start over the people from Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne to get your foot in the door into council. So councillors, I hope you support this today, and I thank the staff for putting the time and effort into this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Prey. Just a couple of questions if I can, Paul. How many innovative and market-led proposals have we received and how many of those were accepted since we put that facility in place?
Through the Chair, we have explored one. We're approached by an entity regarding a sustainability opportunity that, due to timings for both of us, could not get to a final outcome. In terms of an innovation contract, because they're two separate things that are just contained within the one document, we have one of those on foot at the moment, which is a very unique engagement looking at it's an engagement with an IT company looking at the spend and spread of people's attendance and spend across the Sunshine Coast.
Okay. So you know, perhaps we need to think of some other ways of encouraging that, because I'm sure there are people out there with great ideas, unique ideas, and whilst they might be small in number, perhaps the benefit they can bring is considerable. Similarly, what about, is there any correlation between those local businesses who participate in our supplier briefings and we're titled Doing Business with Council workshops that have been successful in securing council contracts?
Through the Chair again, yes there are. Particularly doing business with council is an opportunity to sit down with some procurement specialists from council and go through the documents that we have. What that is doing is, before the tender or the request for quote comes out, or as a learning opportunity if they've had one and been unsuccessful, to explain how council goes about it. Each level of government, in fact each council does it slightly differently. Yep. And I couldn't give you a number from standing here, but it would certainly, in the last 5 years, we've had over 400 people go through those doing business with council. In terms of the ones that have attended the information sessions, we would be above 500, and I'm aware of, anecdotally, at least 10 people who have approached me following having been to either of those who have been successful in securing work. And generally, to be quite frank, they're generally those smaller local businesses that you spoke of before.
Thank you, and well done on the First Nations suppliers at a record level. I think there's probably room for improvement there as well, and also for the social enterprises, and indeed for the fact that we've achieved our 71% of local content. So well done. Councillor Law.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, just a quick question, if I may. In regard to the environment and sustainability new area, you've got we're going to monitor it for improvements in the future. How will you report that back to us and how often? Because for me, it's essential that we know how is this going, because 20%, that's a big contribution to achieving zero net emissions.
Yeah. Through the Chair, I would envisage doing it much like the last slide that we saw to this forum on how our local has done, how our First Nation, how our social benefit has done. The presentation that I had at step 5 was really meant to be the internal review of how did we learn about the procurement and what did we learn and what did we learn about the contract management that could go into informing the next one, but also acknowledge that given I bring these here on a 12-monthly basis, that at the very least on that 12-monthly occasion I could give some report on what we've achieved.
Thank you. And if I might, obviously I want to speak in support of the motion and the procurement that we will be endeavouring to achieve in the next year in what is a more complex marketplace for you to operate. But I'm delighted to see again that the governance changes we undertook last year are coming through in everything that we do, and congratulations to you and the team for doing that around the environment and sustainability. And I'm also really encouraged with the changes to the social benefits, so thank you for that as well. I'll be supporting this, and obviously I encourage everyone to do the same. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Councillor Landsberg.
Oh, thank you. Through the Chair, just maybe a question before I speak to support the motion, and totally supportive. I think it's a wonderful direction that we're taking. But how confident are you, Paul, in dealing with our...
Well, that's okay. I'll go one.
With our...
Thank you.
Tender process and our contractors that are currently aligned with Council to enforcing, obviously reducing our emissions, and I'm sure it's going to be a ride that we're going to bring them along.
Through the Chair, that journey is both a learning journey for Council and will be a learning journey for and a progression journey for our local contractors. Some of them are, I dare say, more advanced than we are already, and will respond quite easily and capably to our newer focus. Some of them will be a bit behind us though also. So I'm confident that we will make a progression and reduce that overall 20% target. I'd like to actually, if I had my way, get to a target where we've, rather than a percentage, we've got some firm metric of what it is, and then seek to reduce that. Because the other 80% could, in theory, stay the same, could go down, and that just leaves the 20% coming a bigger percentage, even though it has been reduced as well. But that aside, I'm very confident that this is heading us in the right direction to have us looking at what we're procuring. So that is us taking on the responsibility of ensuring that what we ask for is sustainable as it can be. And then on the other side, it is the contractor delivering it for us in the way they manage their business. And by doing this, we're getting them to focus on how they can make their businesses more efficient. And that in itself, those two go together to effectively reduce the GHG emissions that are attributed to Council.
Thank you. If there are no further speakers, I'll go back to Councillor O'Prey to close. Okay. You're on, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Listen, I just wanted to say there's a lot of intricate detail in procurement policy, and I congratulate you and your team again for getting through it all. Councillors, this is a very important part of what we do. It's our regular business, day-to-day business, and with the cost of everything going through at the moment, going through the roof at the moment, this could be more timely. So thank you very much. I hope you support all today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Prey. All those in support of the motion? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. We'll move on to item 2. Paul will also present the application of national competition policy. Thank you. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. The national competition policy, much like the procurement policy, is presented on an annual basis. You'll recall that we were with you in May, June of 21, and then returned to deal with 2 particular issues in September and October of 21. Those 2 issues, which are dealt with in the policy now, specifically were off-street parking and our approach to festivals. So I'll get in. What the competitive neutrality principle that the NCP applies to is that an entity, being a public sector entity, conducting a business activity in competition with the private sector should not enjoy a net advantage over its competitors only because it is a public sector entity. Everything that we do from here on in is attempting to ensure that we are not enjoying that benefit that we should not enjoy merely because we are a public sector entity. A quick snapshot of the legislation has us considering, first of all, whether the activity that we are speaking of or considering is a business activity. To be that, council needs to trade in the goods and services of it. After that question is answered, you then move on to a threshold test, which has two thresholds to consider. For matters where the costs are greater than $9.7 million threshold, it is a significant business activity, and for matters that are of $340,000 in an annual term or above, it would be a prescribed business activity. Council then needs to consider how it will manage those, the opportunities to manage it and how you go about it are mentioned in the slide on the right. For new business activities, or when considering on the annual basis each significant business activity, we need to consider, if it's new, the public benefit assessment. If it is being reviewed, as we are now, it's to apply the competitive neutrality principles. That can be achieved by full cost pricing or commercialisation or corporatisation. In ensuring that we don't enjoy the benefit I spoke of before, we need to charge for our goods and services at the full cost of providing those goods and services. I'll leave it at that one because we only have one of those to deal with, which I'll come to shortly. In terms of your prescribed business activities, that's those where our costs are $340,000 or greater. We need to consider, firstly, whether we apply the Code of Competitive Conduct. If we don't apply the code, as there is in this instance on a couple of occasions, then we need to resolve and state the reasons why we're not applying the code. In dealing with our significant business activities and then our prescribed business activities, we have met the obligations of put to you that we meet the obligations of the legislation for the significant business activity of waste and resource management by applying full cost pricing. In terms of the prescribed business activity, we've dealt with those that we are intending or proposing to deal with by, in the two instances there, corporatisation, that being Sun Central Maroochydore and the Caloundra Event Centre. In terms of applying the code, it's the Sunshine Coast Holiday Park and then the quarries. For those that we are proposing not to apply the code to, they are listed there on the screen, and then the reasons for not applying the code are contained within the report. There are then a number of activities which are regulatory based, which by the strictest definition we might actually trade in, but because they are regulatory or policy related, we don't seek to apply the code to them, and you'll note that some of those you will have dealt with earlier in the budget in terms of fees and charges. That's an example for example, the community land permits and parking, where a price has been set for it. There isn't any competition for it, although by the strictest definition of trade, we probably do trade in it. We need to have a complaints neutrality, complaints process to deal with. The legislation is not about anyone ending up in court. It's about almost a self-managed, if there are complainants, we engage with those in order to find some resolution that manages the complaint. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Happy to move, Councillor O'Craig. For the seconder, please. Councillor Hungerford, thank you. Over to you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The National Competition Policy, again, it's all about making sure we don't take advantage of the commercial ability of the council because we're a public entity. So it's heavily legislated. It's a heavily legislated process, and it's all about doing things like, and I'll give some examples. For the public benefit of things like the events that we run here on the Sunshine Coast. The events is a great example. We could make sure that we could make them as profitable if we wanted to, but we try to keep it at a low cost and make sure that it's for the public benefit. And Caloundra Music Festival has been a great example of that for many, many years now. And applying the code to the holiday parks in particular is another great example. So the holiday parks, there's many, many commercial operators across the region that own and privately own caravan parks or holiday parks. We own 6, probably the best 6 on the coast and the best locations. But that said, we can't go and put them out at 50 cents a night so that we can take all the business off everybody else. And in turn, we can't charge through the roof as well. So I'm very supportive of this, and I'd like to think that the council will support it again today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Prey. Any other speakers? Councillor Suarez.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the report, Paul. Here we are again.
Yes, here we are.
I just want to put it on record that I still support, in September, my reasons were not supporting, reasons not to apply Code of Competitive Conduct to the Caloundra Music Festival. However, the review of that festival is in draft format at the moment, and anything I would bring here today would make no difference to what's occurring this year, this calendar year. So I'll wait till that review comes through to see whether or not there'll be any changes to this policy in relation to that event. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Suarez. If there are no further speakers, I'll go back to Councillor O'Prey to close. Not necessary. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Paul. The next item, councillors, is 8.3, which is the Audit Committee meeting from the 23rd of May. The papers have been, we've had a presentation. We'll just take questions and answers on this one. Mr. Matheson's here to answer any questions.
Good morning, councillors.
Are there any questions? Can I have someone move? Councillor Natoli, thank you. Seconded, Councillor Hungerford. No commentary. We'll put the motion. Sorry.
Just before we do take the vote, I just wanted to acknowledge the great work that Glenn Charles, who had pretty much with one support staff, Ziggy, been there as a rock from the first time I was elected in '97. I think Glenn had been working for a couple of years for Maroochy Shire, but you know, his dedication, making sure that our systems were performing, questioning, challenging the organisation as an audit committee and support staff should do. I just want to recognise the 25 years of service and that he's made the decision to retire, and I know that the CEO did acknowledge him during the audit committee meeting. So I thought it was appropriate that I would share that with you today, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Natoli. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Matheson. Item 8.4, again to do with delegation to the Chief Executive Officer. The papers have been circulated. Shelley's here to take any questions. Someone prepared to move? Councillor Hungerford. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Babarowski. Thank you. Anyone have any questions or comments they wish to make? Do you want to speak? Councillor Hungerford.
I was only going to rise to my feet to say that this is an annual thing we have to do on the delegations. There's things we can delegate, things we cannot delegate. We run through those each year. The main one in this year is the Medicines and Poison Act 2019 and associated regulations have also been included in Schedule 1. The Medicines and Poisons Act 2019 repeals and replaces the Health Act 1937 and the Pest Management Act 2001 with a new regulatory framework. This is mainly capturing that, ensure we get the appropriate delegations for our officers to be able to carry that out. That's the main change this year, otherwise it's straightforward.
Thank you, Councillor. If there are no... Councillor Babarowski, you have a question?
No, I actually just wanted to make a point that I did ask for some additional information because I wanted the community to be reassured that this council doesn't take delegations lightly or make them because it's unnecessary or any other thing. So I asked for some comparisons to be made between other significant councils, and it was reassuring to see that a number of other councils have adopted a very similar model. So I'd like the community to feel very assured that the delegations issue is well thought through and well managed by this council, and I have no problem in supporting this report.
Thank you, Councillor Babarowski. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Shelley. Item 8.5 is the May 2022 Financial Performance Report, and I invite Isaac Pickerskill to give us a presentation. Thanks, Isaac.
Thank you. Good morning, all. Councillors, as of the end of May, our operating result is favourable of $42.2 million, which is favourable to budget of $3.9 million in total. Revenues remain above budget of 5.5, while expenses are above budget of 1.6 million. For the month of May, we again received holiday park fees ahead of budget, as well as an early repayment from Queensland Reconstruction Authority of $1.3 million that relates to a grant for the disaster that has occurred in February. Expenditure for May also remains within 1% in operational. Our capital works programs progressed 74%, that's an increase of 9% just in the last month. The $215.6 million expenditure on our $290 million program. Our core program remains at 73%. We're aiming for around in between 85 to 90%, which is a good result at the end of the year. Our council's cash for May is at $210 million. And our debt remains at $643 million, with the council's proposed borrowings of 96.5 to occur this month, in the month of June, and also the reduction in debt of the Palisades payment is to occur next week. Council's the recommendation is to receive a note report titled May 2022 Financial Performance Report.
Thank you. Happy to move, Councillor Hungerford. And a second to Councillor Natoli. Thank you. Would you like to open, Councillor Hungerford?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief because it's the same each month. Very good figures and very tight control of our finances. Like has been stated, positive operating result of 42 million. That's 3.9 million above the current budget as of 31st of May. 477 million operating revenue has been achieved, which is 5.56 million more than the current budget. 434.8 million operating expenses. Of the 433 million budget has been expended, resulting in a variance of 1.6 million. Council's operational expenditure again remains at 1% of the budget year to date. 215.6 million or 74.2% of Council's 290 million capital works program has been financially expended, and as we've stated before, if we can get to 90% this year, it'll be an outstanding result with all the wet weather we've had in February and March. Our core capital programs progressed 72% of budget, and our corporate projects have progressed to 81%. And the other one I would like to point out is I'm looking forward to the debt chart on that page when we get the Palisade payment at the end of this month, taking this at this point in time from 643 million down to 488, an outstanding result. But another fine outcome, and I look forward to getting the 14th unmodified audit this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. No further speakers. Let's put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, Isaac. I'll invite Nick Woodbridge to come forward to give us a presentation on 8.6, which is the disposal or lease part of the state land under trust at 186 Sugarbag Road, Caloundra West. Here he is, right on cue. Thanks, Nick.
Good morning. Item 8.6 is a report seeking an exception from the local government regulation to dispose of an interest in part of state land under Council's Controller's Trustee located at 186 Sugarbag Road, Caloundra West, to enable a commercial lease to be registered for cafe and bike hire repair purposes. In July 2021, Council constructed a facility to accommodate a commercial tenancy suitable for the operation of a cafe and bike hire repair facility to activate the Sugarbag mountain bike trails. Council, in conjunction with its appointed real estate and marketing agent, have released 2 public tender opportunities seeking tenants to lease and operate the commercial tenancy. The first public tender closed in October 2021 and the second closed in April 2022, and following evaluations of the submissions and ongoing lease negotiations, no successful respondents were either deemed suitable or formal leases did not progress. The premises comprises of 3 lease areas which are being made available to the market for rent, and the total area of leases A, B and C are approximately 58 square metres. The recommendation is to resolve pursuant to section 236, subsection 2 of the Local Government Regulation, that an exception to dispose of an interest in land for a lease over part of council-controlled 186 Sugarbag Road, Caloundra West, other than by public tender or auction applies, as the lease has previously twice been offered to the market by public tender and a lease has not been secured via this process. The consideration for the disposal of council's interest in part of 186 Sugarbag Road will be equal or greater than market value as determined by an independent and registered valuer. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Someone to move, please. Councillor Landsberg, seconded Councillor Cox. Sorry, Councillor Babarowski. Would you like to open, Councillor Landsberg?
Oh, thank you, through the chair. Maybe just a question first, Nick. And look, I know this is a new park that we've opened up there with the mountain bike trails, and it's been wonderfully attended by so many locals. But looking at the site, I know it's been difficult for us to. There's been a couple of potentials that haven't been taken upon. Is there an opportunity for, because I know shade's such a priority in that area, to actually work with increasing the shade area between those 2 structures of A and B?
Through you, Mr Mayor, Councillor Landsberg, we can look at that. So the project team has delivered the site as is, but if shade's a concern, especially for the operator of the tenancy, then we can look at potentially installing some shade to activate that space.
And the other thing as well is, as we know, Sugarbag Road is just becoming increasingly so busy. People are taking that as a shortcut to get into CBD. And it is a concern with the actual access entry into that. And I think a potential leasee would maybe look at whether there's a way we can control some of the traffic flow past that site. I mean, it'd be a great opportunity for a cafe and a bike repair store, but there may be a few other changes. But overall, look, I support this opportunity. And do you have anyone in mind? I mean, you want to work with an individual. You don't have anyone that's actually aligned at this stage to take it on?
We've received a few applications through our real estate agent that's been marketing the premises for us. So after we obtain the resolution for this report, we'll go through those applications and negotiate.
All right, I'll leave it up to any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Landsberg. Any other speakers? Would you like to close, Councillor, or have you done enough? Okay, let's put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Councillors, we now move to item 8.7, changes to the proposed site-specific and editorial matters amendment around Buddina Urban Village. And I invite Roma Stevenson and Steve Patey to give us a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, councillors and the CEO. This report has been prepared in response to a written notice received by the CEO from Councillor Cox on the 25th of May 2022 under section 6.2 of Council Standing Orders. That notice requested that a report be provided to and considered by Council outlining the content of the proposed Sunshine Coast Planning Scheme 2014 Major Amendment relating to site-specific and editorial matters with respect to the Buddina Urban Village prior to the proposed amendment being forwarded to the Planning Minister for consideration of state interest. On the 28th of April 2022, Council resolved to make an amendment to the Sunshine Coast Planning Scheme and to delegate authority to the CEO to prepare and progress the proposed amendment, subject to amending the planning scheme provisions for land located in the northeastern section of sub-precinct KAW LPSP 4A of the Buddina Urban Village, to include this area in the medium density residential zone from the high density residential zone, and to specify a maximum building height of 12 metres from 21 metres, and to make any other consequential amendments. Having regard to the written notice received from Councillor Cox, this report outlines the changes made to the proposed amendment relating to the Buddina Urban Village for Council's information and noting. In accordance with Council's resolution OM 22 of 24, updates have been made to the proposed planning scheme amendment, particularly in relation to the explanatory memorandum and the amendment instrument, to reflect the proposed changes to the zoning and maximum building height for the northeastern section of the Buddina Urban Village. The changes made to the explanatory memorandum and the amendment instrument are highlighted in yellow in Attachment 1 and Attachment 2 of the report. Attachment 2 of the report, which is the amendment instrument, shows the changes that have been made to the zoning and maximum building height of the northeastern section of the Buddina Urban Village. As indicated in this extract of the amendment instrument, it is proposed to amend the zoning from the high-density residential zone to the medium-density residential zone on the Kawana Waters Local Plan Area Zone Map. This extract of the amendment instrument shows that it is proposed to amend the maximum building height from 21 metres to 12 metres on the Kawana Waters Local Plan Area Height of Buildings and Structures Overlay Map. In accordance with the current Council resolution, the next step in the process is to forward the proposed amendment to the Planning Minister for consideration of state interests and to seek approval for Council to proceed to public consultation. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Roma and Steve. Councillor Cox, would you intend to move?
I'd like to move another motion, which I've circulated to the councillors via the meeting management. And it's just to add item B, which I'll read out for the purposes of the meeting. For reasons of good planning practice and due to the potential adverse impact on housing choice and availability, decide not to proceed with that part of the proposed Sunshine Coast Planning Scheme amendment, in brackets major amendment, site-specific and editorial matters relating to the north-eastern section of sub-precinct KAW LPSP-4A of the Buddina Urban Village and remove it from the amendment package prior to its submission to the Planning Minister for consideration of state interests.
Can we get a seconder to that so Councillor Cox can speak to the motion? Councillor Babarowski. Would you like to explain, Councillor?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Babarowski. Councillors, as I notified the CEO with that request for a report to come to Council, I had missed the OM back in April, and so I felt that there needed to be a little bit more discussion in relation to this matter, which is hence why we had this report come to us. But with your indulgence, I might just flag the fact that I might need an extension during this process. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. That first of all, we've got a housing crisis. So that's one of the points I'll be speaking to. Second of all is the planning history, and I thank the officers for the additional information that they circulated during the week, which for the newer councillors might help to understand the history. And then the third one is I call it ad hoc planning approach that the previous resolution seemed to follow. So I'll start with the housing crisis. It's widely been reported that the Sunshine Coast is in a housing crisis. Nearly every second day, this topic is featured in some form of media publication. So I don't think anyone can argue the fact that we're not in a housing crisis here on the Sunshine Coast. So why does Council see fit to remove the potential housing opportunities in an area that has been planned to accommodate growth for the past 18 years? That's 2 planning schemes that this has been in place already. The previous resolution would see around about 60 plus dwellings less if it stays at the 12 metres rather than the original 21 metre. So I shouldn't have to remind people in this room that we've got population growth heading our way and that this goes against every principle that Council has been trying to adhere to. I'll briefly touch on the history, which you probably would have read with the additional information that was circulated. Once again, I thank the officers for preparing that package. So I recall, having lived in the area for 21 years, that specific area, back in 2003, when the draft Caloundra City Plan came out and the discussions that occurred at that time. I must admit, I've been keen to see the Buddina urban village emerge because it's taken a long time to get there, and we're only just starting to see the benefits of that planning come to fruition now. So yes, there has been one property, one multi-unit development actually completed in the Buddina urban village. That's the Hedge. There is obviously the Buddina Beach, which is under construction now, and there's another one that's been approved in Bermudui, Luana Drive there. I also just wanted to touch on a bit of the history in relation to some of the past decisions of Council, and specifically around the Buddina urban village. Back in February 2019, there was a rather large community meeting in the Buddina State School Hall regarding the lodgement of the code-accessible Buddina Beach development on the corner of Pacific, Talinga and Iluka. The following month, in March, a petition was lodged regarding the Buddina urban village by some of the residents in that area. The following month, in April, Council actually approved the development application for that particular site. Now, I recall at the time, having lived just around the corner, people were led to believe that Council had suddenly changed the zoning to accommodate that 6 to 7 storey building, when the reality was that it had been approved for well over 15 years in terms of the height provisions. Hence, it became very apparent to me that some residents had moved into the area during those 15 years and possibly hadn't done their due diligence on what the zonings were located right next door. So the third thing I want to touch on is what I consider to be an ad hoc planning approach. As the local planning authority, Council needs to be responsible in where we forecast that growth, where we plan for that to be accommodated. With Kawana functioning as a major activity centre, it functions as a major activity centre.
Councillor, I'll just get someone to move an extension. Councillor Winston, thank you. Councillor Babarowski, those in favour? That's all except carried unanimously. Carry on, Councillor.
Thank you, councillors. As I was saying, with Kawana functioning as a major activity centre, responsible planning would logically see infill development proposed there, given the existing services. So we have a major shopping centre, we have public transport, we have library, community facilities, the list goes on. Plus the fact that there is spare capacity in those trunk networks, the sewerage, stormwater, traffic, etc. So let me just get that right. It's functioning as a major activity centre, and there is spare capacity in those networks. And we had always planned to accommodate growth there. As I said, because I was absent from that April OM when this matter was debated, I actually went back to watch the live stream, just to sort of see how the debate went. And I actually want to acknowledge Councillor Hungerford for raising the points that the amended motion on the day appeared to be ad hoc. Those were his words. In what he considered to be planning on the run. And I tend to agree wholeheartedly with that. I also noted the logical comments from Councillor Dixon, who expressed a concern that he felt like it was taking piecemeal bites out of the planning scheme, and that he felt this discussion would be better off for the whole community to have their say under the potential new planning scheme. Once again, I certainly agree with him. So before I wrap up, I thought I'd just share some further information, and this is the same information I shared back in 2019 when Council was debating that particular Buddina Beach development approval. At the time, I remember going to the sales manager at the Hedge building where the apartment and I asked him where the apartment purchases were coming from. I wanted to know where they were located, moving from. At the time, I was told around 75 to 80% of all the contracts that were signed at that particular time, noting that it hadn't all been sold, but there was certainly a fair amount of contracts had been transacted at that stage. I was told that they came from within the 4575 postcode, which is the local postcode. Now that makes total sense to me because I realise when residents get older, maybe having a single unit house is a bit too much for them to maintain, but they don't want to move away from the area. They want to reside in that given area where they obviously have spent a fair bit of time because they've got friends, neighbours, relatives potentially living there. That's their, their home. They don't want to move away. So councillors, I hope that's provided you with a little bit of a context to why I brought this back. Now, I also just wanted to make reference to the fact that in that additional information that was circulated, there was a map there which indicates what the mass modelling of that particular area is, and I was hoping maybe meeting management might actually be able to bring that up. It was in the additional information, and it was page 22, I believe. So councillors, you can see that on the far right there, that grey area, that's the actual residential low density area to the north of Talinga Street. That's an 8.5 metre height limit. So south of that, which is from the pink through to the red, that was the area that was previously determined at 21 metre height. So as you can see, that pink one there has been approved. 2019, council approved that. The yellow area is the area in question that the previous OM sought to bring that down from the 21 metre height to the yellow level, which is 12 metres. So in terms of consistency in that area, I just think that doesn't make sense to go 8.5, 21, 12, back to 21. I think we should stick to the original intent of the planning principles for the Buddina Urban Village, and I just encourage you to see the sense in behind what I'm asking here today, and I look forward to any debate and any questions you may have.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Any further speakers? Councillor Hungerford.
A few questions. We were looking at doing this in the new town plan. Any further work on this particular point here? I think that was at the last meeting we were looking to doing a new town plan to make any other amendments or changes here.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's correct. It was identified as a planning direction in the recent material that went out on preliminary consultation for the new planning scheme project, which identified this area to be considered for review in terms of the height.
It's my understanding, under the South East Queensland Regional Plan, the densities we're given to accommodate in our town plan. We're doing a new town plan, you must achieve these. And in that, we're given 65% must be infill development, increase the densities in our current areas, and only 35% in the greenfield development area. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr Mayor, we do have what I call benchmarks that exist under the SEQ regional plan, and it breaks those benchmarks up into consolidation dwellings and greenfield dwellings. And yeah, right, you correctly described the relativity between those different types of dwellings that are required to be provided under the regional plan.
So where I'm going with this is, the motion we had before, or that is dealing with, has us changing the density in the current town plan with no offset to it. So what I'm thinking with that is, if the state looks at this and rejects it, does that negate us being able to put it into the new town plan because it's already been dealt with?
through you, Mr. Mayor. I guess there's a couple of comments just to make there. The first one is about the state interest review process. So obviously this amendment would need to go through that process and be approved by the state, and the state would assess it against what other state interests, including the regional plan and including the impacts upon council's capacity to deliver on those dwelling benchmarks. That's the first point. Secondly, I think practically, if an amendment was rejected at this stage by the minister because of that state interest, it would certainly make it more difficult to prosecute that as part of the new planning scheme, because it would have been a matter that's already been prosecuted by the state. I don't think we can be definitive about that because circumstances change, but it would certainly be something I think council would want to be cognizant of.
That's why I was bringing the point there, because we could not achieve what the result is here. I thought that going with the new town plan and being able to articulate how those growth targets we're going to meet, if we're taking it out of here where it's going to be offset, would give it better chance.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly, look, the state will be looking for the new planning scheme to do a lot of heavy lifting around consolidation, because actually if you look at the split between consolidation and greenfield dwellings, we are pretty good in terms of tracking the 15-year supply of greenfield, not so great with consolidation. So it's certainly a tension point for us, and yeah, there will definitely be, where there are areas that are lost, I anticipate the state will be expecting that they're both offset and the additional areas are actually identified as part of the new scheme.
Thank you. And the other one I want to clarify is the school is right across the road from this particular area. I believe the density and height there has been increased to 15 metres.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. The height of that is 15 metres.
Thank you. That just clarifies a few points.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. Councillor Natoli.
Mr. Mayor, first of all, I'd like to just question the process. We talk about good meeting management processes. This is really repealing a decision that council has made. Even though it's a part decision, it's really repealing, and the appropriate notices have not been given to be able to repeal this, to give the community the understanding that there was going to be a aspect of a previous decision that was going to be repealed. And to get this on our tables this morning, I don't believe meets the intent of what our meeting procedures specify. I'd like that to be clarified.
Well, I'll give you my version and then we can get some further advice if we need to. It's not unusual for an existing resolution to be overtaken by another resolution. And that can be done via a rescission, and it's interesting that today we approve in the budget meeting the green bins. Some of you will recall back in the 2012-16 council, we had a go at that and backtracked. But also I could use the example of the decision of this council not so long back around on-street parking in Buddina. I mean, there is still a resolution that sits there in the local area parking plan that says, there's a particular position that was overturned effectively during the course of this council. So, I mean, I guess I think it's always difficult when you've got what I might call omnibus items in a report, such as we had at the last meeting, where there was a half a dozen things that were loaded in that. That perhaps we need to think about dealing with those in isolation more. But to my end, this is just another means by which we advance a majority council decision, if that should be the case. If you want a more deeper explanation than that, I'm sure Victoria can add something.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I would just add that council can make a decision on any matter. So this would be viewed as a fresh decision in light of this being a matter that is brought to council today.
So I take it that that part of our meeting procedures isn't really relevant if we can make any decision that supersedes a previous decision. Therefore, there's never any need to repeal any previous decision. If that's the way that I'm reading it, would that be correct? Then
through you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think that's correct, no. This is a new decision that Council can make and has been brought to Council today. The repeal process, as you say, has not gone through, but it is our view that this is a new decision, and if Council feels that this is not the correct way to make this decision, then Council can vote against this decision, against this motion today.
Mr. Mayor.
Well, I'm taking it that Councillor Natali wants to now speak to the motion.
Yeah, I'll speak to them. Mr. Mayor, it is disappointing that a notified notice hadn't been given to the community to be aware of this, as the previous last month's report and amendments were notified the specified time frame, and the community have an opportunity to be able to read and understand what is being put before them. This will be a surprise for many people in our community. And it will be an incredible gut-wrenching disappointment to think that we've given them what they've requested. 2019, a sizable petition was handed to this council, and it's taken a long time for it to finally reach the floors of this council, and for council then to make a decision, and a decision that supported the community in reducing the heights and change, for once dealing with the anomaly of that high density when the southern part has 12 metres and medium density, finally dealing with that anomaly and getting this right. It is also disappointing to know that many of the residents there actually want the height reduced. They wrote to council last time and said we supported the reduction. These are people who live in this area and they are supporting. I asked a question about the nodes. The nodes, and you can see here that you need to be able to amalgamate 3,000 square metres to create a node. I know that the current Talinga Street development is going ahead. The developers purchased the 2 blocks beside it. The neighbours don't want to sell. There are others in that area have built new houses. There's an application at the moment, 90 Pacific Boulevard, that is for a house, 16.85 metres. So it won't be all 12 metres in that area. They still have a number of years by the time an amendment was to take place that they could use the use it or lose it provisions to be able to still apply. And if the developers can put these together, it doesn't exclude them from still being able to put a deal together. But the residents are sick and tired of being harassed by developers wanting to sell. They want peace and quality of life that they haven't had because it's seen as game on for everybody. And they basically said to us, we're sick of them knocking on our doors and persisting on them considering to sell. Last week, the council achieved a very prestigious biosphere nomination. And yet, the impact of lights on endangered loggerhead turtles opposite this beach is well known. We dealt with it with the Talinga Street development, and even there the lighting experts said that if all the lights are on over Christmas, yes, it will have a negative impact on the turtles. And here we are, not only 1 week less after that nomination, we're going to be challenged of whether man can live with its natural environment. And the Mayor talked about that it's a celebration of both man and the natural environment. And here we are, we have an opportunity to best manage that light by reducing the height in this particular area. A height that the community, who are so committed to supporting the turtles. I've seen you, Councillor Cox, there speaking, and we know how much the community have got behind supporting the turtles, the hatchlings, and protecting them. They do their job. Our job now is to make sure that the impacts on the natural environment is mitigated. And the best way that we can do it is not through conditions, as we know we can't condition human behaviour. And therefore the best way that we could do it is to drop the heights and support the residents, their petition. I really hope the councillors realise that this was a pretty cruel game, that if we had indicated to our community that we supported them, take that away, and then what hope have they got in 2 years that councillors are actually going to listen to them? I'm concerned. We are supposed to be listening to a community. They sent us a petition. This is a natural process that we go through. I suppose I was surprised that the recommendation wasn't there, considering that there was previously at a workshop support.
Can I get you an extension, Councillor?
Thank you.
Would you mind? Someone, Councillor Christian, Councillor Winston, all those in favour? Let's carry it unanimous. Carry on, Councillor.
So, and I would have hoped that the recommendations had come through to support this, and had they, I don't think we'd be here today. Just the fact that the officers have a different opinion to what the community expectation, but it would have been nice to have had that support and the recommendation of the officers that the heights be dropped and not just the density. So does this mean, I suppose, now that we go back to a high density and we go back to 21 metres if this gets up? And I don't know what this means for my community, who have fear about mass transit, have fear about this 62% of infiltrating and basically pushing the population densities on the coast. You know, in an area that's quite sensitive, and this location here is one of the areas that is prone to erosion, prone to climate change and the impacts of climate change, the storms. So I just fear the message we're going to send to our community if we go back and step back, a decision that we've all made. And I've been told, and I know, we often get smashed in this forum, and we walk away with a loss and we feel like we've been aggrieved, but we accept the majority of decisions. And that's a decision the last council, whether we were here or not, on holidays or unavailable, it's irrelevant. The fact is the council at the time legitimately made a decision to support the community petition, reduce the heights and the densities, and for us now not to accept that decision, it really questions, for me, you know, the intent and what we as a council clearly indicate to our community that we're willing to listen to them and support them.
Thank you, Councillor Natoli. Councillor Lansbury.
Well, thank you, through the chair. I'll have to read off my phone, so I can't open my laptop. Just a question for the officers, and in terms of the South East Queensland Regional Plan, and just looking at our preferred identified growth area that's already acknowledged along that coastal area, obviously along Buddina, Warana, what reputational damage can that do in terms of, for council, with approving amendments like this that have been downzoned? How does the state look upon those changes? And it's pretty similar to the question that Councillor Hungerford raised.
Through you, Mr Mayor, look, the state's position as expressed to me is that you know, they're very keen for council to achieve its consolidation benchmarks. That's not to say that a council can never amend the planning scheme to change the zoning of land where there's good and compelling reasons to do so. But it would certainly be a factor from the state's perspective, and it's what, you know, they assess state interests every time we lodge an amendment, and they look at the balance of our amendments over time as well and how we're tracking, and yeah, it'd certainly be a factor that the state would be interested in and take a keen interest to understand what the impacts would be.
And I'm sure this is really getting to the crux of it, which we'll be discussing in the review of our planning scheme. It's the attitude of not in my backyard. And it's coming down to all of us need to share the load. We've already seen decisions made in this chamber about any developments north of the Maroochy River, and we're really copping it down this southern end of the coast. So I'll be interested in looking forward to future planning scheme changes and where we move forward into the future. But I think we've got to acknowledge growth is coming. And I know that the comment made about our affordable housing crisis and what these units or a potential loss of 30 to 60 dwellings on the foreshore could be, but we really have to look at accommodating extra growth along our coastal corridor, and I'll be supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Landsberg. Councillor Babarowski.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A couple of questions, if I may. I'd like to try and reveal something of the thinking in the original planning of the village. Look, can I just quickly check the Buddina primary school site? Has anything changed? Is that still intended to be a primary school site? It is?
Do you, Mr Mayor, correct?
So how, could I ask, can you recall, or would you be able to give a professional opinion on how significant that site would have been to the decision to have that height and density in front of it in comparison to the southern leg, which has residential? Is that a significant consideration in the heightened zoning?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I was just going to say, I think it's the composite of things that are available in that area that are material to supporting additional density. So those things were, the fact that there was the regional shopping centre, the community facilities, including the school, all I think contributed to the planning basis for additional density in this location, and obviously this area in particular is particularly proximate to those facilities.
So if I may just further explore that, I imagined that it was relevant that there wasn't residential looking up at 21 metres directly behind it, that this was a school site, and therefore the amenity impacts were less, if I can describe it as less. Certainly not as imposing as on residential. Is that a fair summation or not?
I think it's certainly a factor. I think it's certainly been a factor in the mix.
All right, look, thank you for that. I want to overemphasise that. I just think it's relevant. The other thing that I wouldn't mind your opinion on is the role of the village in the general, the village concept in the enterprise zone. How we were developing a meta pattern of east-west villages that would all support our concepts in the enterprise corridor, and this was an important part of our growth trajectory. Is that, could you just elaborate on, was that part of the thinking again when those decisions were made back?
Through you again, Mr Mayor. Yes, I think certainly the opportunity presented by that location to support increased tourism and residential activity was a key consideration, and the fact that there was lots of community facilities and the capacity to get a link through from the Caloundra Shopping World site through to the Surf Club to create what could be termed a high amenity urban village in the longer term. It's taken some time to realise that concept has been referred to today. I think that was a precursor to some of the thinking about having more types of urban villages operating in the coastal corridor as a way of supporting housing choice, diversity, and creating great places on the Sunshine Coast.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to establish.
You, Councillor Babarowski. Councillor Law.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, I just have a few questions to start with, if I may. On the 28th of April, when this was first discussed, I recall that you weren't in the chamber due to a conflict of interest. Are you able just to explain the reasons that it's okay to be here for this one and the same conflict doesn't continue to exist?
Yes, I am. As I said earlier, you'll recall that there were a number of items brought to us for consideration around planning. One of those items was the Sunshine Coast Airport, to which you will recall I've previously on all occasions the airport has been discussed, raised that as a conflict of interest given my role as a director of LGIA Super, which is a funder to Palisade Investment Partners. the fact that this matter is now being brought specifically around the Buddina urban village, I have no conflict at all with that.
Thank you very much for the answer. It makes me think, if I may just comment on your answer, that perhaps where a whole range of issues are brought forward and there's only one that presents a conflict of interest for you or any other councillor, that maybe we should see if that could be pulled apart so that the people who can be involved in a debate and a discussion are able to be involved as much as possible. I don't know what we would need to do, but I might like to suggest that to perhaps to the CEO.
I think it's a good suggestion, Councillor.
Okay. Question, I think, to Councillor Peter. What was your request in the written request to the CEO? What did you ask for, please? Because that hasn't been revealed to me.
Councillor Law, I sent that through last month, so I can't recall the specifics, but I emailed the CEO asking for a report about this matter to be brought to Council, which is here in front of us today.
Okay. So, did your request include Part B that you've brought to us today?
Not at the time, because I was asking for background information which I felt wasn't available to you as the councillors making the decision on the day, the planning history around the Buddina urban village.
Okay, so if your request to the CEO was as per the report that came forward, that we should receive the report and note it, it sounds like what we've got now is a repeal request. So I'm curious that you didn't approach councillors that advising us with 5 days notice as per 25(1) in the standing orders, that if you wish to repeal a previous decision that you would give notice to councillors 5 days in advance. So I'm really curious about going via this method rather than going on that, because this now looks and sounds like a repeal, but it didn't set out that way.
Clearly, Councillor, that's your interpretation. I've asked staff for advice through this matter. I asked for the report to come, and it came. I have every right as a councillor to throw up a different motion, and that's what I'm here to do today.
Would it help, Councillor Law, if the CEO just read the original request?
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. I've got the original request from Councillor Cox here before me, so I'm happy to read out the words for that. It says, Dear Emma...
What date was that?
Oh, sorry, it was sent on the 25th of May 2022. Might have to crouch down because I'm not wearing any glasses. Dear Emma, I refer to the Council's resolution of 28th of April 2022 OM 2224 relating to the Sunshine Coast Planning Scheme 2014 major amendments, but site-specific and editorial matters. As briefly mentioned at Monday's workshop, it is my understanding that during the course of Council's consideration of this matter, the officer's recommendation was amended and subsequently resolved by Council such that the proposed planning scheme amendments package would also include amendments to the scheme provisions applicable to that area in the northeastern section of sub-precinct KAW LPSP 4A of the Buddina Urban Village to include this area in the medium density residential zone from the high density residential zone, and to specify a maximum building height of 12 metres from 21 metres in that area. Acknowledging that this scheme amendment will need to be submitted to the Planning Minister for its first state interest review, I'm hereby requesting under section 6.2 of the Sunshine Coast Council standing orders that you bring a report to the next available ordinary meeting outlining the content of the proposed submission to the Planning Minister solely in relation to the proposed amendments to the Sunshine Coast Council planning scheme relating to the Buddina Urban Village as outlined above, including any relevant background context information. I would also request that this report be provided to and considered by Council prior to the submission being made by the Planning Minister. To avoid any doubt, I am only seeking that the report to Council address the proposed scheme amendments relative to the Buddina Urban Village and not any other scheme amendments that were covered in the submission considered by Council on 28th of April 2022. Thank you for your attention to this request. Regards, Peter.
Thank you, appreciate that. And I certainly don't intend to suggest that I want to limit the opportunity of anyone to bring forward amendments, changes, whatever it might be. But I recall that this matter generated a lot of discussion around the right and the better way to do things. And this looks like and feels like a repeal. So just that notice of 5 days would have been welcome. My next question is, you've emphasised, and quite rightly, the housing crisis that we're in. So my question for you, Councillor Peter, is what would be the median price of those potentially lost 60 dwellings in your knowledge of the area and your expertise and past career in real estate?
Councillor Law, I've been out of the property game for 10 years, so I would just be guessing as to what the average sale price would be. But I've never once said it's about affordable housing, never once. I said it's about, as it says up there, good planning practice and due to the potential adverse impact on housing choice and availability. Choice and availability is the key, because those people that live in that area want to retain and stay in that area. So it's about giving them opportunity to have, not move away from the area, but to stay local. And as I said, there has not, well, I think I said that earlier, apart from the hedge, the last building that was built in Buddina was 1998, and that was beachside Buddina, and that's in the tourist section. So you'd be really struggling to actually reside in that particular building. So hopefully that answers your question.
Certainly we've had comment that it's a housing crisis, and someone has mentioned affordable housing. Maybe it was Councillor Terry, I'm not sure. But my limited knowledge of what's happening in the housing sector is what will happen here will not do anything to help affordable housing. I accept your point that it's about choice and so on. I might reserve the right to speak, if I may, Mr Mayor, later on, subject to whatever queries come up.
Thank you, Councillor Law. I'll go to Councillor Suarez.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I might just start with some questions and also reserve my right to speak after more debates occurred. I just wanted to ask the officers, Councillor Landsberg mentioned that there would be 30 to 60 dwellings lost if the height is retained at the 12-metre mark as per the resolution of April. Is that the correct figure?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I think it's extremely difficult to be definitive about what might be lost, because it really depends on what the ultimate configuration of development is, whether there are any surplus lots. But I don't think that figure of 60 dwellings is unrealistic, assuming that there are a small number of additional developments that occur there.
The second question that I have is, you mentioned that any shortfall in terms of infill development has to be accommodated elsewhere. Would 30 to 60 dwellings be able to be accommodated elsewhere in infill development across the region?
Through you, Mr Mayor, in order to make up that loss, it would need to be rectified by some zoning change in some other part of the region. And you'd certainly anticipate that as I sort of said previously, in terms of the new scheme, we'll be looking for more consolidation opportunities to satisfy the requirements of the regional plan and respond to our own planning.
I know it's a bit difficult to sort of answer these questions because I've only come up with them today, because we've only received this today. In terms of turtle, impacts to turtle with the lighting, I'm not familiar with the heights of the dunes in front of this development here. Would you be able to quantify at all what the impacts would be to the lighting for the turtle nesting for a 21 metre to a 12 metre comparison?
Through you, Mr Mayor, look, I'm certainly not an ecological expert, so I don't feel like I could express those views.
Yeah. I'm sorry to ask the question, but it's certainly something that's playing on my mind, and
what I can perhaps say is that the matters were certainly ventilated as part of the appeal for the Buddina Beach development, or sorry, the judicial review process. And as I recall, I think the court found that it felt that the conditions that were imposed upon that development were satisfactory to address the issues raised in respect to that matter.
Just in terms of why people are not taking up the opportunity to develop in that area, do we have any rationale as to why people haven't taken up the development opportunities as they exist?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's always difficult to sort of comment on the machinations of the market. Certainly, you know, there's some obligations in this area in terms of creating development nodes and having larger development sites. Now, part of that in some areas of the precinct is about getting connectivity through, and that's best achieved by having those larger development sites. But it is practically difficult to assemble more land, so I suspect that certainly has been a factor historically. But more recently, there has been a fair chunk of the Buddina urban village taken up. Certainly the central component, there's developments that have either happened or approved. And on the northern part of this precinct in question, there is a development that is being constructed as we speak. So whether that's different to how the market normally takes up land in these zones, from my experience, probably not. It's sort of the opposite. These things tend not to be feasible until they are, in my experience.
Thank you. I might leave the questions there, but if I may, Mr. Mayor, I did do a quick realestate.com search on property sales prices, if I can answer perhaps David Law's question. At 5 Bermagui, there's a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 1-garage dwelling for $500,000. There's a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1-garage dwelling for $795,000. And at 84-85 Pacific Boulevard, a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-garage place is going for $1.17 million. There's a number of them that are over $1 million in around that 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom configuration. Councillor Cox is correct, he never mentioned affordable housing, he did mention housing choice, so affordable housing isn't part of this debate.
Thank you.
Councillor Law, please.
Do you mind if Councillor carry on, Councillor?
Sorry, just to clarify, Councillor David, I know I made the comment about affordable housing, but it was the opportunity for many single-use dwellings for people to actually move out of those houses in terms of once we age in demographic, to make built stock available to potential people that can afford another home. So that was what I wasn't actually talking about, the affordable housing of the cost of the apartment on the foreshore there at Buddina, but what could be available with people moving into those residences.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor O'Prey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll go straight to speaking to the motion. Firstly, in regards to process, there's been a bit of conversation around the process. I actually congratulate Peter Cox on bringing this to council the way he's done it. He's quite within his rights to do it. He's done it in the right order. He's contacted the CEO's office, he's made requests, it's gone to the offices, and he's made the correct process possible. But most importantly, what he's done is very, very clever. Because what we're doing now is we're giving the ability to bring this back into our debate and discussion for the planning scheme that's coming up in the next few years, where it belongs. We've heard the conversation about ad hoc conversations, chopping and changing in our planning scheme, all right? And this actually negates that. This brings it back to square one and puts it where it belongs. And I've got to say that rescind motions, they work, they don't work. I've done one, it did work. It's a bit hit and miss at times. But when you've got an instance where we had in April where Councillor Cox was away, and for whatever reasons the Mayor had to step out of the room, which I think is ridiculous. We do need to separate those items when we're talking about that, which David Law brought to our attention. We need to have everybody in the room when we're talking about pretty important items as changing the planning scheme without taking it to a planning scheme, to take it to the greater community, and etc, etc. So I commend you, Peter, on this. I think what you're doing is very clever. I think it's the right process. And I think we absolutely 100% need to have workshops on this in the lead up to our new planning scheme, so that's very clear for everybody. If my memory serves me correct, we also had a very close vote in the last one in April. I don't know the exact numbers, Mr Mayor, I can't recall those sorts of things, but I do know that there was a lot of councillors that were speaking about the ad hoc, and then they decided to vote with it, and that's why we're here today. So if you're one of those councillors, I'd strongly suggest you consider what I've been talking about, and it's cleaning the slate and getting this back into our planning scheme conversation for next planning scheme. So I'll be supportive, Peter. Thank you, and well done.
Thank you, Councillor O'Prey. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've just got 3 questions, I think. The first one is, each one of those allotments would be approximately 20 metre frontage, would that be right?
Approximately 18 to 20.
18 to 20. So we're looking at 160 metre length reduction from 7 stories to 4 stories.
3 feet of 150% of that is above footprint.
Yes, right. The next question is, what economic impact would this decision have on each one of those properties if they were just wanting to sell, of reducing it from 21 metres to 12 metres? Would it have much of an impact?
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's not an assessment we've undertaken.
I don't know the answer either. So the next question is, if you bookend it with 21 metre structures, that 140, 160 metre length, that would have a lower height and maybe less attracting of or misdirecting the turtles. What's the situation there? Are they going to be attracted more to the lights on the bookends, or confused by it, or what? So it's hard to know. Personally, they're the questions that I don't have an answer to. I haven't seen it, so therefore now I want to know, Mr Mayor, seeing as I've asked those questions, and I personally feel I haven't spoken to the resolution, I'd like to move a procedural motion that we defer this matter to next month's meeting, so that councillors can make themselves more familiar and perhaps visit the site.
Okay, is there someone to second the procedural motion? Councillor Natali. All right. Do you want to have you explained sufficiently?
I think I've explained it. Yeah, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to vote.
Yep. Councillor Hungerford. Well.
Yeah.
Just let me.
We've got to move in a second, but I think we need to understand what they're actually doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the procedural motion to lay the item on the table till the next meeting.
Well, I'll put a question to that. Would that mean, if we put a procedural motion, this gets laid there, because what we passed at that meeting, there was multiple planning amendments there, this is just one of them. If we do that, does that hold that whole process up? Because the resolution covered all those items in one thing. This is just one of those items. So if we're going to hold it over to the next meeting, does that hold up the rest of the amendments as well?
But it's part of a live motion.
I would probably ask a question of Mr Patey whether we can still progress with the ones that have been fully passed, and I don't know what that would mean to the one that was excised or is in consideration at the moment. Mr Patey.
Thank you, Madam CEO, Mr Mayor. I think practically, given the fact that Council has a current resolution for a certain package of amendments, that it would be more prudent to wait until that package was finalised before it was submitted to the Planning Minister. I think to take other actions probably makes it more confusing in terms of the engagement we have with the state. So that would be my advice.
Councillor Law.
So, for clarity, that means it would hold everything up until we deal with this one, because it doesn't make sense to... You can't process it. You've got this one hanging in abeyance, and we're going to wait another month for that. Holds everything up. That's the point I'm getting to.
All right, any other speakers to the procedural motion? Councillor Suarez.
If I could just ask a question just based on what Councillor Hungerford has said, I just don't quite, it's not quite clear to me. If we defer this for another month, that holds the whole package up for another month before it goes to the Minister, would that time frame have any negative impact to us progressing that whole amendment?
Through you, Mr Mayor, it only has an impact insofar as the Planning Minister won't receive the package or complete their state interest check, obviously, until such time as they do. The consequence of that is that the state interest review process may be delayed, or it may take by a month, and the public notification of the amendment subsequently might not occur until later as well. So it just pushes the whole plan making process effectively back a month.
Sorry, so if we do that, is there any negative impact to the other amendments that we're going to proceed through to the Minister? Is there any time criticality to those amendments?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I don't think there's anything that is absolutely time critical. Certainly we're keen to progress the amendments in respect to, you know, the airport, given the significance of that piece of infrastructure, but probably over what is normally a 2-year plan making process, 1 month is not necessarily significant.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor. So, Councillor Law, you want to talk on another matter? Okay, would you mind just turning your light off and I'll put you back first next time? Councillor Cox.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. I won't be supporting this because we've already heard that the amendment package will take around about 12 to 18 months to go through. And this particular item, as we're referred to here, the Buddina Urban Village, can be dealt with during the planning scheme, which will probably be about that same time frame. So I don't think that this is a wise move, and I don't think councillors should be supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Babarowski.
Just a quick question to Councillor Johnson. What new information do you think would be revealed in that month period that would help you make a decision? What new information are you seeking?
Thanks for the question, Councillor. I don't know the area. I'd like to visit the site. I'd like to see what everybody's talking about. Councillor Cox, Councillor Natali, they intimately know the area. They disagree totally in relation to the matter. And I don't know which way to vote. And not on this resolution, on this procedural motion, but in relation to the amendment or the motion that's been put forward by Councillor Cox. I haven't got a hope of knowing whether I should vote for it or against it. And I'd like to make an informed decision. The reason why I am wanting to know the more information is because when the agenda came out, that wasn't a resolution or a motion, I should say, on the agenda. And I only found out about it last night. I haven't had time to examine the situation, look at it, and I like to make informed decisions.
I'm right in saying we did discuss this at the Council of Information, which was 10 days ago?
Yes, the paper was discussed.
Okay, no, I know
that motion was not discussed.
No. But yeah. Okay. Let's put that procedural motion to the vote. Those in support? Councillor Natali, Councillor Johnston, Councillor Dixon and Councillor Suarez. Those opposed? Councillor Law, Councillor O'Prey, Councillor Hungerford, Councillor Cox, Landsberg, Babarowski and Jamieson. So that is defeated. So we're back to discussing Councillor Cox's motion. Councillor Law, that's where I'll go back to you.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. Just to speak to the motion now, I will not be supporting the motion as it is. I am fully committed to the original decision made on the 28th of April. I believe I understood very clearly what that decision was at that time. I'm grateful for the additional information and the history provided, and of course we should be very aware of and understand where we've come from to arrive at a particular point. However, that doesn't mean we can't make an alternate decision and make another decision for the future and what comes next. What I would do is, there were 5 of you, Councillor Winston, you were in support of what was decided on April the 28th. I would encourage you to remain firm with that particular point of view. Yes, we've got some history, but as I've said, to me it doesn't particularly change any significance of how that decision was made and why we need to have that one. So, yes, there is a serious issue of housing and housing availability on the Sunshine Coast and across the whole nation, and it's worse in some areas than others. In terms of affordable housing, this won't actually do anything. And the cascade down, if people are moving within this particular locality, even then it will do nothing to support and assist and aid housing affordability. Yes, it will increase housing stock, but it won't increase it soon enough or anything like fast enough. If we've been waiting since, I think you said 1998 was the last one, and now we've got the hedge, that's a very long wait, and we'll probably have a new planning scheme and maybe another one before anything here is impacted of what gets built next. If we have that additional 10 metres, that will be some of the most expensive prime real estate anywhere on the coast. That doesn't do anything to help our housing affordability at this time. We had significant discussion about it. We're having some more now. Interesting to hear Councillor Winston says he had your amendment yesterday. I got it 10 to 11 today. I really feel that this could have been done, not wanting to take anyone's ability to do anything on the floor of council, but I think it would have been a better way to have said 5 days ago, I'm thinking of, or I intend to repeal the motion and this is what it is. I feel that would have been a much more satisfactory way of doing this, from my point of view, and in terms of doing good business. So I remain firm with the decision made on the 28th of April. I would encourage people to follow that decision as well for the reasons that were discussed and debated at that time. And some people even got to speak to the motion twice. So we have had significant conversation and discussion about this. Great, let's do it again, but let's allow the strategic planners to get this matter moving forward. And I am very comfortable with what was decided and with the height limit changes as per the discussion on the 28th of April, and I can't support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Councillor Hungerford, I think you've only questioned so far.
That's right.
Yep.
I let things go for a while, and I asked my questions for a specific reason. I don't think some people have heard it. For Councillor Natoli and the residents' benefit, I'm looking at it from the eyes of you're sending it down to the State Department, you've got planners there and strategic planners, and they're going to look at what's requested, but they're going to go through the history on this. Now, when I looked at it, it started in the Caloundra plan in 1996, and then subsequent plans 2004 right through to 2014. And there's been a very distinct flavour of where this is going. And they're going to take that into account in doing this assessment. Being asked to go from 21 metres down to 12 metres, in an area that's clearly over multiple plans in different councils, has increased the density here and the height's been consistent through there. Now we're going to ask them to consider 21 metres down to 12 metres. Against that backdrop and setting, where we have 21 metres already built, comes down to a few houses there, the 8.5, then it goes up to 16, comes down to that one again, has another 21 at the end. So just think about it. If you're a planner looking at this, you're going to go, what are they asking for? Because it's wanting to reverse something after the fact the horse has bolted. And remembering, and this is why I always said in the beginning, the best place to do this is in the new town plan, holistically, with the whole density and argument there. This is doing it in the current town plan, wanting to take something out that I think lacks the logic and reason for a planner to look at that. You've also got to remember that anyone there wanting to develop has 6 months to lodge their intent to preserve their rights under the current plan. So what are you really achieving? And also you've got to look at the school has now been amended to 15 metres against 21 metres across the road, and now wanting to put down to 12. I'm just putting this in the perspective. This is what the planners are going to look at. And that's why I asked a very clear question. If we sent this down now, and they looked on those parameters and rejected it, would that make it harder for us to prosecute the case in the new town plan? I believe it would, but that's a mute thing. It's down to interpretation and who's dealing with it. And I also want to point out that a rescind would have been the wrong thing for Peter to do here, because the motion handled a multiple of town planning amendments. A rescind would have rescinded the whole lot and you start again. So I wanted to bring this out just to deal with this one. I think when I look at it in logic, it is the right way to do it, because it doesn't hold up the original motion and all those other planning amendments. So for me, I'm just putting it to, saying this loudly for Councillor Natoli and the community, doing it this way, the way we passed the other day, will it achieve the result? It could actually achieve the opposite to what you're trying to achieve. It's not easy, it's not straightforward. So with this one here, councillors, you've got to think very carefully, what are you trying to achieve, and will you achieve it by doing it the way we had proposed on the 28th of April? Is the new town plan the proper way to do it in a holistic approach rather than on a spot ad hoc approach? That was the argument I put up last time, but I'll leave it with you. I just want to clarify those points to give you something to think about, because those planners and strategic planners are going to look at this and what all those town plans have said, what's actually happened at the moment and what adjustments have been made and what's being asked for. My personal opinion is I think we're more likely to get a rejection than actually pass through, and otherwise you can explain it under the new town plan holistically with the offsets and the densities and everything that's asked for there. I still think that is the better way to go. But it's up to the council to make its decision.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. Councillor Suarez.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll speak to the motion. I'm probably feeling a lot like Councillor Johnston. I would have liked some more time to sort of ask some relevant questions to make a good decision on this. I thank Councillor Cox for bringing it forward. I think you offer some good insights, and I would have liked to explore that further. However, we talk about the history of the site and the decisions that were made in the past, but no one's really mentioned or really stressed, I guess, that any decision that's made on this planning scheme will have to take into account factors that we've learnt since 2019 and since 15 years ago, and those factors include what we've learnt about turtles and turtle nesting. It includes our biosphere nomination. It includes a whole range of factors. It includes the state of the market. We're in a booming market at the moment, so to say we couldn't absorb 30 to 60 dwellings elsewhere in our infill development, I probably think is perhaps a bit of a stretch. In addition to that additional information, we've opted to send our options analysis to the state government. So we've got a dedicated mass transit corridor, and I know that's been in the works for a long time, but I won't be able to support it today because I don't feel that I've got all the information that I could make a valid decision on one way or the other, and I'll support the resolution from April.
Thank you, Councillor Suarez. Councillor Babarowski.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, the questions I asked were to try and remind us of the depth of thinking that went behind the original conception of our urban villages and how that fitted into the enterprise corridor and how that dealt with our response to the growth. And whilst I do acknowledge some things have changed, I would suggest to you the biosphere nomination process took into account the urban village concept and didn't have a problem with the way that we had developed a concept of development in the enterprise zone. And in fact, we achieved the Biosphere nomination success. So I don't accept that that's a stepping back from those values. I think it's difficult for me to really think that the lighting design for a 12-metre building is inherently better than a 21-metre building. No one knows that because you don't know the lighting design or the building design. What you have heard is that the agencies involved are satisfied that our response as a region fully takes into account our responsibilities to do with design and the impacts on the terminals in that location. So I think it's too speculative to just make an assertion that 12 has to be better than 21. I don't accept that as an assertion. On housing affordability, I just think, again, it's too speculative an assertion to say, well, because of the cost and the location of this, that won't contribute to anything other than housing choice. It won't affect housing affordability. It depends what the properties were sold by the people who were moving into this. They could well have been detached housing that could be in different areas that could be developed for affordable housing. Again, we're just speculating because it suits a particular argument on the floor. So I don't really feel that that's compelling. What I do think is very important and compelling for me is the fact that we've taken an approach in the past where we use our planning scheme process to think through the meta picture, the overall picture of how we're going to respond to growth as a region. And the urban village concept was a very important part of that, in fact, instrumental to us achieving our conception of a village of villages, a community of communities, and all of the support that gives to lifestyle, transport, etc. And I think this is, to some extent, was described as on the run. That's harsh, but I do think that the process of putting this inside of an envelope of other submissions was very difficult for us to deal with. And as the chair at the time, I remember it was quite difficult for people to get their heads around. They could agree with this bit, but not agree with that bit. And I think the absence of two critical members of the council body politic was significant. So I'm pleased to see this back here today, and I will be supporting the motion put by Peter Cox.
Thank you, Councillor Babarowski. If there are no further speakers...
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. There's a fair bit of logic either way. It just doesn't matter where you're coming from on it. There's some logic, and hearing Councillor Cox and Hungerford and a few others, it really gets you thinking about the situation. And like Winston, I do support and believe that councillors should have the time to go out and undertake their assessment, and that's why I supported this item laying on the table. And I'd hope my colleagues would support me if I ever ask for a bit of time to do a bit more due diligence. That fact aside, one thing I've been accused of in the past is supporting development too much. And I know that was probably my biggest attack in the previous election. If anyone tried to find something wrong with me, which can be difficult, they said, planning's your thing you're failing on, you're supporting too much development, start listening to the community. That was the number one thing I heard that louder than anything. And I actually remember at the election, like many in this room, made the commitment that they would try and listen to their community more. Actually, many of us said that when we got elected or re-elected. And at the last meeting, I and ahed, listened to the debate, but I ended up going with the local councillor. Councillor Joe has made the argument many times. I know the argument back to front. He ran on the campaign around the issue of infill development and public transport nodes and whatnot, so I get it, and that's his local position on it, and that remains unchanged. The point for us, though, is that
what is going to change between now and doing the new planning scheme? Many in this room have already telegraphed the fact that they don't support the community's wishes to downzone. So don't delay the decision, make a decision today and show your hand with where you sit regarding the heights in this precinct. Saying that, you know, a holistic approach in the future will be a better way of doing it can be a good argument, but today the community are asking, where do you sit on this issue? Do you support higher densities or remaining where they are, or do you support the reduction of densities? And one thing that I need to remember is that the last meeting I actually supported the local councillor. I made that decision, and with those 300 plus submissions from the public, I made that on the basis of having a discussion. That's all these planning scheme amendments are. Let's not forget that you're not making a decision here today to enact the change to the planning scheme. This is not the ratification of downzoning. That can't happen without the state government engagement and support to then go back to the community to do your community engagement to find out what the community think before you consider it, to send it back to the state before the state sign off that you can endorse it in your planning scheme. So don't be fooled today that it's a decision to actually downzone. This needs to go through the state government, as Councillor Hungerford has said, and the state might throw this out. That is a real thing that may actually happen. We need to see if that's going to happen, but potentially test that. Whether or not you believe now is the right time, perhaps we need to test that. But the kicker for me is the community. They've told us that they want us to review this. Councillor Natoli has been working on this since day one, and I remember this being the same issue when Councillor John Connolly was the local councillor. This was brought up then, and even he was going to public meetings where there was hundreds of people turning up and there were newspaper stories and front page stories about it. So the point I'm trying to make is there is an issue here. Do I know all of the ins and outs of the issue? Probably not, but I want to find out what those issues are from the community. And if the community come back and tell us through this engagement, if it goes to the state, that council's got it wrong, leave it where it is, we support the urban village, development at all costs, leave it how it is, I'll be proven wrong, and that's fine. That's democracy, but at least give the community the opportunity they've asked in electing their divisional councillor to represent the issue, and that's why I won't be supporting this today.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. If there are no further speakers, I'm going to go to Councillor Cox to close.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, thank you for your contributions and your debate today. Wrote down a couple of notes as everyone was speaking, and just to touch on something that Councillor Dixon just raised. We use this word community, what the community says. I'm the community, I live there. Certainly, I hear the voices which are quite loud in that area about specific matters. But as I mentioned earlier, the hedge, it was occupied by 75 to 80% of people moving to that property from the local community. So you've got to be very cautious when you use that word as to what the community wants. I started my introduction talking about those three principles, the housing crisis, the planning history of the Buddina urban village, and what I consider to be an ad hoc planning approach. Now, some councillors have questioned the way I've gone about things. I would just remind you that Councillor Joe changed the officer's recommendation on that particular day. That was against, like, he's entitled to do that. He changed that, made an amendment, and it was supported. So 18 years of history was out the window from that particular decision. I'm just saying, keep that history. Let's go out to the new town plan, and that's when the community can have their say. Now, as a local resident, I'm fully aware of the impacts that this will have to me probably personally. There'll be more people on the beach, there'll be more people driving around that particular area. That's going to impact me adversely. So if anyone in this room wants to sort of question where I'm coming from, like I take exception to that. I stand by the principles of the Buddina urban village that I was involved with back in 2003 as a local resident, going along to those community meetings and participating. And, you know, here we are 18 years later. I'm looking forward to those being delivered for the local residents. So I know that continually hear as elected representatives, stick to the plan. Well, this is the plan. Stick to it.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. We'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Babarowski, Landsberg, Cox, O'Prey, Jamieson. Those opposed? Councillor Natoli, Johnston, Dixon, Hungerford, Suarez and Law. So the motion is defeated. Thank you, officers. Let me now go to 6.5. Okay, anyway, the decision's made and the motion is defeated. There are no notices of motion, there are no petitions and there are no confidential items. So I'll declare the meeting closed at 1:15. Thanks very much.